and good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Mrs. Sanyam Gupta and all her helpers in organizing this conference as an important digital meeting place. Norwegian ShipOwners Association fully supports all efforts to increase the diversity of our industry. We have important challenges ahead of us where we need new solutions for the future. For instance, on low and zero emission technology. Our industry needs to attract talents of both genders to develop these new solutions. And we think meeting places like this puts important focus on the opportunities in our maritime industry. We also appreciate that you are highlighting the issue of crew change on today's conference. Now, 9 months into the COVID-19 pandemic, I can certainly confirm that the virus has thrown the shipping business into a state of unusual. Operational challenges and the crew change issue in particular have been very challenging and still are. We see important and very positive progress in the development of vaccines. However, we still have to live with and find ways to deal with the complexity of crew change for quite some time. During 2020, we have experienced tough and rapidly changing travel restrictions, lack of standardized procedures for necessary travels across nations, and lack of trust between different nations' health systems. I have to underline that we really appreciate the close cooperation with Norwegian and other national authorities on this issue, and the very clear message and all helpful protocols from the IMO, the UN, ILO, and other UN bodies. 80% of the world's trade is transported by ship, including food, medical equipment, and energy products. The current crisis has underlined the great importance of the ocean economy. Without seafarers, our common supply chains will be seriously affected. The work of our seafarers is essential to secure the flow of goods we all depend upon. As of now, still several hundreds of thousands seafarers await to disembark or embark ships and vessels globally. Some have been on duty for more than a year. This takes a very hard toll on the seafarers and it affects their families. That is why it is absolutely essential that seafarers are designated key workers. The IMO has adopted protocols to secure safe crew change during the pandemic. Crew change adhering to clear standards. Rapid changes in national and local regulation limit the maritime industry's possibilities to coordinate and plan. Therefore, we need a global commitment to the IMO protocol. Adherence to the IMO protocol not only ensures the predictability the industry needs, it also ensures safe crew changes. In several countries, it is of concern that health authorities do not necessarily consult relevant maritime authorities when deciding on new regulations. This contributes to misunderstandings and unnecessary stringent requirements affecting ship owners' ability to plan and seafarers' ability to embark and disembark ships. We know the crisis will be with us for the foreseeable future. We need to act now to keep supply chains open and to look after the seafarers that have been on duty for far too long, often with consequences both to their physical and mental health. It is also crucial that the maritime industry, the ship owners, and the crewing companies do our share to ensure that seafarers sent out to serve on ships all over the world are infection-free. The Norwegian ShipOwners Association, in collaboration with 10 of our members, have established a quarantine and test center in Manila. Our center has been in operation since 1st of October, and the experiences so far have been positive. Going forward, it will be essential that we work closely together internationally within the framework of the IMO and the UN. This will call for the clear engagement both from national authorities and from the industry itself. My hope is that we shortly will succeed in establishing corridors where we can rely on regulations and plan for crew change in high volumes. With this short introduction, I am looking forward to following the panel discussion. Thank you all.
Individually, we are strong, but together we are stronger. The ones who decide to set aside their fears, take a chance, take a stance, and let the world know that they care, can move mountains. When all the stakeholders come together and collaborate, solutions appear. Friends, this is the theme of today's panel discussion, rising above the blame game and working together for a greater good. I, Jagmeet Makkar, am delighted to moderate this power-packed panel discussion. With almost 40 years of diverse commercial and technical experience in shipping, today I offer services as a shipping expert, maritime arbitrator, learning and development partner, and a ship finance consultant. I'm the chairman of the Hong Kong branch of the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers and chairman of Maritime and Logistic Arbitration at the Hong Kong Center of International Commercial Arbitration. We will have 40 minutes of intense yet interesting interaction, followed by 10 minutes for concluding remarks by the panelists. Dear friends, if you have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A box. Unanswered questions will be addressed by the panelists later and the response emailed to you. Now, I would like to take a few minutes to introduce our esteemed panelists, not in any specific order. Mr. Amitabh Kumar, Director General of Shipping, Government of India. Shri Amitabh Kumar IRS is a civil servant belonging to 1987 batch of IRS, Indian Revenue Services Income Tax. Shri Kumar took over as Director General of Shipping and Additional Secretary, Government of Shipping, Ministry of Shipping, Government of India in January 2019. He is one of the 5 recipients of the G5 Governance Award 2014 all across civil services. Since his posting in the DG Shipping, he has been instrumental in drafting of new merchant shipping bill and multimodal transportation of goods bill. Shri Amitabh Kumar is widely regarded as a leader who has introduced digital reforms in maritime administration by rolling out e-governance platforms like e-migrant software, training module, recruitment and replacement service module, examination module, Swachh Sagar, biometric seafarer identity document, and digital certificates for watchkeeping, DC endorsement, etc. Thank you, sir, for joining us on this panel. Ms.Karen Avelino, Executive Director, Business Development, Philippine Transmarine Carriers Incorporated, PTC that is. Karen Avelino is currently the Executive Director of Business Development and Head of the Cruise Division of PTC, one of the biggest crew management and crew agency organizations in Philippines. A pivotal moment for Karen came at the onset of the global pandemic, when she was in front and in the center, advocating for the shared interests of principals and crew members alike, while working on the repatriation of almost 17,000 cruise line crew members, with protocols and guidelines evolving almost every week and compounding pressure from the government sector, cruise line companies, families of the crew, and the crew themselves. She and rest of her team were able to successfully bring the repatriated crew members safely home. Karen, they must be blessing you. Thank you for joining the panel. Mr. Anil Devli, Indian National Shipowners Association. A lawyer by training, Shri Anil Devli is an active member of the Indian Maritime Fraternity. He has been involved with the Indian shipping industry for over 20 years. He is currently the Chief Executive Officer of the Indian National Shipowners Association, an organization which is involved in furthering the interests of the Indian flag. He has varied experience in the business of ship owning and operations. In addition to his experience in pursuing policies for the growth of the Indian shipping industry, Anil passionately engages in thought contribution towards other maritime related activities. He's a industry. Thank you, Anilji. Ms.Su Anand, a lawyer by training, Su was a maritime disputes litigator in Singapore and Hong Kong for 14 years before moving in-house, where she is currently the head of legal for the commercial arm of an Australian junior mining house. She has been actively involved with the Hong Kong shipping industry for over 10 years. In addition to her legal experience, Su is passionate about diversity and inclusion, particularly in the maritime industry. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome our esteemed panelists. Now, let us start our panel discussion. Initially, I am going to give 1.5 minutes to each of the panelists. They can give an overview of what they think. What are the challenges in crew change in your opinion? How has it changed with regards to openness for crew change with or without restrictions? Can I say, Anilji, if you can?
So thank you so much for that opportunity. This is great to be here. And to quickly answer the question and off the bat, as an opening batsman, is that I think one of the greatest challenge that we as an industry face is the lack of understanding amongst those who are not part of the shipping industry to understand crew and crew changes. I think that is, in my opinion, by far the biggest challenge that we face. Those who are away from the industry look at it as something which is way ahead. It is something that is so wonderful, and they all believe that we all live in one different world, which is where people are traveling from place to place, getting things done. Little do they realize that ours is actually a world where we are all the time working. That seafarer, if he's traveling, he's getting onto a vessel, he's not going there and having a holiday. It is his work. He's finishing his job and he needs to come back. And several times in these past 6 months, especially when the sign-offs have got difficult, people have asked, so what is it? He's staying on a ship. He has a good air-conditioned cabin. He's getting food. Why are they getting so excited? So I think I have realized that if after this, what is it that I'm going to do for the next 1 year, more and more education to people ashore as to what shipping is about and what is the life of a seafarer. Because this is something that, we have, at least I have not realized, because I've been sitting perhaps in that cocoon and, interacting with our own people. So we don't realize. So I think that is the biggest challenge. And I think as INSA and myself personally, I've decided that I'm going to try and answer that.
So basically, you're absolutely right. I agree with you. I mean, we need to make people more aware of what our people, the breadwinners, the frontline workers, they do on board the ship. Suyin, what do you think?
Right. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And thanks for inviting me to be part of this panel discussing the really, really important issue of the challenges that face crew change. I think to open, it is not an easy topic to tackle, and the physical realities of effecting crew changes is also really, really complex. The 3 points that come to mind about why this has become such an issue. The first point is we are dealing with a pandemic, and the reality of a pandemic is that it is a fast-changing situation. The virus is always one step ahead of governments, one step ahead of regulators. What that means for regulations, and particularly crew change regulations in particular, is that there is a lot of uncertainty that's involved. You could be told today that, okay, we'll allow you to effect crew changes. These are the quarantine restrictions. These are the visas that you require. These are the tests that you have to undergo. But the moment there is an outbreak in a city or in a port, the regulations and the requirements change again. So we're dealing with a lot of uncertainty. And as we know, businesses don't like uncertainty, particularly the shipping industry. Secondly, linked to that uncertainty is that we are dealing with inconsistent regulations and regimes globally. There is no one international set of regulations dealing with crew changes. We have to deal with the requirements of each port, and then with the uncertainty linked to the regulations of those ports, ship owners, crewing managers, have to deal with hundreds of regulations, and there's no one platform that is helping us monitor those fast changing regulations. Although in the innovation space, you do see solutions starting to pop up now. And I think thirdly, and I believe this is a topic we'll probably touch upon later, is a misalignment of drivers and of values in the transportation supply chain. What does this mean? It boils down to one word: cost. The cost of effecting crew change and the cost of human life. Who should bear the responsibility? Where should that sit? And which one should take priority? If at all, that is a question that has to be discussed. But in the commercial reality, when you talk about crew change, the issue of who should bear the cost comes up: the ship owner, the charterer, the end consumer. So this makes it a very complex situation to deal with. And that's why I think we're having this very interesting and timely panel discussion today, which I look forward to.
Thank you, Suin. I think what Karen has done, the 17,000 seafarers, she brought them home. So Karen, what do you think, like in terms of the overall opinion you have about this topic, as well as what were the challenges you faced personally and with your team to get those boys and girls back home?
Yeah, the challenges were really enormous because it's not just a pandemic, and it's a realization that the shipping industry does not exist on its own. There are a lot of connections that are involved in the shipping industry. So we started with limited choices of crew change ports, lesser flight availabilities. We have visa restrictions and the different standards in time frame of RT-PCR test results. And bottom line, there's also an increased cost of onboarding and disembarkation. While there are a good number of countries that have opened up their borders, there's still no uniform standard for crew change. Each country has its own set of requirements, and that even makes it more inconvenient for seafarers. I already came up with a recommended framework of protocols for ensuring safe ship crew change and travel during this pandemic. They already proclaimed seafarers as essential workers. And all of the protocols is a consolidation of various protocols and guidelines submitted by different maritime stakeholders. However, despite this protocol, there are still different types of interpretation, and it's really compounded with a lot of inconsistencies on how it could be applied. What we just need now with this protocol in place is cooperation of various government authorities of various countries and the shipping companies and all the stakeholders. And the objective is really to make sure that crew change would be easier and better.
And
you are on
coming
mute.
to yes, and coming to the Philippines example, how do you think in Philippines the government has handled the situation with regards to the local, the domestic, as well as the foreign crew with regards to their changes?
Okay. Philippines roughly has 400,000 seafarers serving various international vessels. And when the cruise line companies ceased operations in March, they started repatriating their crew. And this was when problems came up. Because of limited number of flights, a lot of cruise line companies decided to use their own vessels to bring home the Filipino crew. Before we knew it, there were 23 vessels in Manila Bay with Filipino crew that had to be disembarked. There were thousands and thousands of Filipino crew that had to be disembarked. And the Philippine government, good thing, they were willing to open the ports for crew change and came up immediately with protocols and guidelines. But first and foremost, the objective is to avoid the further spread of COVID. So basically, the situation was chaotic and Metro Manila became so congested. This was further compounded when the cargo vessels also started doing their crew change in the Philippines, which included foreign nationals. So Philippine government came up with a Philippine Green Lane for seafarers that included foreign seafarers. It was a fast action for the Philippine government to come up with a Green Lane policy for seafarers, but it was not perfect at the onset. So we were learning and refining along the way. And until now, the Philippines is still experiencing a lot of challenges and issues. Like the rest of the world, we were not prepared for this, but we have met the moment. I should say that with the Green Lane policy of seafarers, the Philippines can now be considered as a hub for crew change.
That's a very good news. Thank you, Karen. Sir, why I left you for the last to answer this so that everybody gives their opinions. And before I ask you to say something, I would like to thank you on behalf of all the seafarers and the shipping companies in India, especially for the efforts being made, the SOPs which have been implemented, not only for Indian seafarers, but also for the foreign seafarers. What would you say, what's the way forward, and what's your opinion about this specific topic?
I think I'm the only one presenting the government's point of view here. There were two issues that you raised. What were the challenges and what is the way ahead? The challenges that we faced initially, first of all, let me say that crew change should not have been a challenge. Crew change is an integral part of shipping business. And if it is business as usual for shipping, then crew change should also be part of usual business. But because of COVID-19, certain restrictions had to be put by the government initially in respect of crew change because the countries were not prepared. No country was prepared to handle a pandemic. What were the problems? The problems were simple. The cities, including the ports, were not ready with testing facility. They did not have enough isolation centers. They did not have enough quarantine centers. COVID beds were not available in the hospitals. And it was not possible to allow any foreigner, whether a crew or a traveler, to come and further congest limited resources that the cities had. Then the flights were canceled, local travels were restricted. So it became almost impossible for the crew to move for crew change. What happens now is, of course, the SOPs have been put in place. The ports have prepared enough infrastructure for testing facility, isolation center, quarantine centers. COVID hospitals have been identified. There is an SOP for emergency evacuation, even for COVID patients. So by and large, crew change has stabilized. That is mainly because the facilities have now been created to facilitate crew change in COVID atmosphere.
Thank you so much. I think what we have achieved, I'm saying from the Indian perspective, and what Karen is saying, what Philippines has achieved, and we are two of the three largest cruise supplier countries. I think it is very, very encouraging to see that. Now, ship owners, coming to the ship owners and ship managers perspective, the ship owners and ship managers are themselves victims of the difficulties in a crew change scenario. And it's not the lack of trying that quality ship owners or managers have been unable to relieve the crew on board on time. But the real constraints on the ground have made these good intentions, noble intentions, futile. Suin and Anilji, if I ask you, is crew change a ship owner or his appointed ship manager's problem? I, is it a commercial issue or is something like a humanitarian sort of thing? Ladies first, Suin.
Um, so I think, in my view, crew change is not only a ship owner's issue, it's not only a ship manager's issue. When you consider how long away from families these men and women have been serving on board ships, and I understand quite a number of them are now serving in excess of 12 months away from their families on board a ship, I believe it becomes an issue that is larger than just the ship owner or the ship managers. Would I say it's a humanitarian issue? Well, to me, it depends on how you define humanitarian. But I think when you have issues of mental wellness, you have issues of isolation impacting people, men and women who are just trying to do their jobs, just as we are, it is a humanitarian issue. Now, who should be involved in tackling this problem or finding a solution to this problem? I believe it's everyone who stands to gain financially or socially from the work that these men and women are doing ought to be part of the solution. So it's not just the ship owners, it's not just the ship managers, it's the charterers, it's the retailers, it's the governments, it's the the owners of the ports. Everyone involved in the supply chain should be involved in finding a solution. I can give you an example of what my company is doing. Uh, we were hit quite a bit. A lot of our ships a lot of our ships, chartered ships, load cargo in Australia. And as we all know, Australia is the gold standard for anything to do with the shipping regulations and quarantine regulations. So we did run into some issues there. The complexity arises again, not because we're just dealing with Indian crew or Filipino crew or Myanmarese crew. It's also, where has the ship been before, right? Where your previous port of calls have been impacts your quarantine restrictions as well. So it's quite a complex situation. So we have been actively engaging with our ship owners to see how we can actually work together better to find a solution to effect crew change. Now, there will always be a dollars and cents involved, and that boils down to a commercial negotiation. But I think it's everyone who's involved in the supply chain. All of us have to be part of the solution. I always say, we working onshore expect to go to work and come home safely, be able to return to our families safely. It's no different for crew.
Absolutely, Suin. Thank you so much for putting it so concisely. It's a very difficult topic. You know that yesterday we had this mock arbitration, and for both the aspects of the arbitration, whether it was the procedural or the substantive part, COVID-19 and crew were at the base. They were the underlying issues, and it's so very important. Anilji, what do you think?
Yeah. So I'll only add, I won't repeat what Ms. Anand said ahead of me. As far as we at the INSA go, I don't think there has been any reference to whether this is a commercial or a humanitarian issue. I think this is business. This is part of the way I run my ships. Just as I need to take care, just as, for example, INSA needs to take care of me, or the members need to take care of me. Equally important is the fact that I need to take care of the seafarer on board. Just as I need to take care of, and I'm not, I must be very clear, I'm not equating the human being to the equipment, but we all realize that that entire asset is in the hands of these few people. I mean, that is the kind of reliance that you pay on people who are on board. Owners buy assets worth millions of dollars, and next day morning, they are giving it to a set of 12, 15, 17, 20 people who are going to run that asset. The owner is sitting somewhere else. He does not see the vessel. The bank doesn't see the vessel, nothing. So that is the importance of the seafarer that we see. And therefore, what is important is to ensure that while HR people keep, talking about need to take care of our people sitting in the office and take good care of them. I think it's exceedingly important to ensure that my seafarers on board my ships are motivated, they're happy, their problems are my problems. I'm able to understand what is it that they need. And at times like this, when we are unable to assist them to come back home, we need to worry about them. And then it becomes from something which is part of my business, it gets extended. Because I think businesses doesn't get over with the office. For example, my employers don't treat me differently when I'm 6 o'clock in the evening. They take care of me no matter what happens. So I think it's not commercial. It doesn't end there. In fact, in this case now, we find the need to reach out to the families, because they are the ones who are anxious. Anxious mother, an anxious wife, somebody's pregnant, somebody's unwell. And in this COVID times, imagine the angst of the seafarer. His father is unwell. He's got COVID. He knows he's got comorbidities. Oh my God, this is, I mean, it's frightening as we speak, even today. So to my mind, and we have tried to approach this in this manner, and not try to, put it into either this or that segment. I trust I have been able to convey the sentiment. I think that is what is more important, and that is what the seafarer needs to see. He needs to see that, oh, there is somebody who's got my back, as they say.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, so Ian.
If I can just add on to one point, I can't remember the exact statistics right now, but I think it's about 80 to 85% of incidents at sea is due to human error or neglect on board a ship. And we've all seen the research in relation to the impact of extended service on board ship and the impact that has on the mental wellness of seafarers. So if you put these two statistics and these two facts next to each other, it becomes everyone's problem, because the longer we are unable to effect crew change for crews who have been at sea longer, it increases the probability of an incident occurring due to human error or neglect. I'm not saying it's going to be 100%, but it increases the probability. And if something happens at sea, everybody is impacted. That is the pure commercial, financial consequence for everyone. So I'm saying this not because, I'm a bloody-minded commercial person, but I'm just saying this to try to put that message out to the people who are listening into this panel discussion today, that if you're a charterer or if you're you're a retailer waiting for your goods to come, you can't say it's not your problem, because if something happens at sea and there's a delay, or your cargo sinks to the bottom of the sea, it then becomes your problem. So let's be proactive and try to prevent this from happening by working together to get crew home.
Absolutely. So I just want to ask you one question. How come you can imagine the situation of seafarers without even having gone to the ship? Anyway, let me come back to my next one. It's so very important to be able to understand. Now, what happens in an office today here? If somebody has a problem, you rush home, your parent-teacher meeting, you immediately go to the school, or somebody falls sick, take the person to the hospital. Just think about that one human being on the ship. And with all this, during my time, there were no telephones, nothing. You get a letter, maybe with the pigeon brings the letter at the next port after 30 days, 35 days. But now you get all the information, and you get the information, your dad is not well, as very rightly Anilji said, or your wife is not well, or the kid is born, and after that, for the next few months, you haven't seen, and the kid is not well. It's not easy. And at the same time, what is expected from that seafarer is like 24/7, you have to perform. Go down to the engine room, go to the bridge, keep a watch, uh, follow the traffic rules. Coming into Singapore, 10 ships coming from here, 10 ships going from there. And still you expect that guy to be absolutely perfect presence of mind. It's simply not possible. It's not human. And that is why everybody needs to understand that. So Karen, what do you think from your perspective? You're muted, Karen.
Okay. What was your last statement again? I'm sorry.
We were talking about the humanitarian part of it, and especially Filipinos. Before she
Yep.
says now, since she gave me the opportunity to speak, I tell you one thing: I've sailed on board with Filipinos. Yeah, what is most important is respect and being working with them. If you give them due respect and work with them, give them the responsibility, treat them as the right people that you should be treating, they are absolutely wonderful people. So Karen, yes.
Um, I still believe that, respect begets respect. Okay. In anything that we do, people will work well if they're treated well. But basically, on the part of Filipinos, I guess we were really born to serve in the vessels because a lot of them are really wanting to. A lot of them are still interested up to this time. And the only problem at this point in time when all of this pandemic came into place is that I think it was, I don't call it maltreatment, okay, because nobody was expecting this. And it was the absence of, guidelines and protocols on how to address this protocols. It just came very late, and all of them really suffered. A lot of them suffered. We've seen a lot of cases wherein people were asking for help through social media, etc. On the humanitarian aspect, it's so difficult to say that anybody's at fault. Okay, but I guess the best way to address this or to put a value on all of this is that next time we have to make sure that we would always think ahead of time. Okay, whether there's a pandemic or none, we should already think. I mean, this will not happen only now. This will happen in the future again. It's evolving. We've had these cases way before. So, um, like I said, there's no blaming here, but I guess everybody has to work that in the future we can really act accordingly.
Right, Karen, I know you have to go. So let me just ask you the last question and just to summarize thing. Unless you can stay back a bit longer, is it okay?
Let's say 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Good. Then I'll go to Amitabh first, and then I'll come back to you before I go anywhere
Okay.
else. Amitabh, what do you feel about? I know the government is doing a lot, not just in India but other places too. Uh, what is driving? What is the thought process behind it, in addition to the commercial part?
One thing we all need to realize is that it is not one person's responsibility, and everyone in the value chain is responsible in some way or the other. Uh, we in India, uh, we were lucky that we took COVID a little seriously, and we started working on it before COVID actually hit India. And from day one, we made sure that everyone in the value chain was involved in the decision making process. So we had lengthy meetings with INSA, with all the RPS agencies, with medical doctors, with civil aviation ministry, and airlines, and everyone was involved in the decision making process. Uh, as a result, if you'll notice, we stopped crew change precisely for 28 days. And within 28 days, we opened up the Indian ports for crew change, and all Indian ports were ready for crew change. The flights took some more time. It took about 2 months for the flights to be resumed because the flights were not available. But the day the first flight was opened, the seafarers were allowed to use that flight. And in addition, we managed to get approvals for charter flights for the seafarers. So why we managed to do it was because everyone was involved in the decision making, and everyone took it upon themselves to be responsible for bringing back the crew that was due to come back. And not only that, because of this, they managed to send fresh crew also during the pandemic. Within a month or so of the pandemic, India managed to send fresh crew to replace the crew that was due to come back. So everyone has to take responsibility. And unless and until everyone takes responsibility, this issue cannot be solved.
Absolutely, sir. The collaboration is absolutely important. Working together, all the stakeholders, which is the topic of this discussion today. So, Karen, coming back to you, your time is running out. So, if I ask you to name 3 or 4 things, let's say 3 things, what is it that the stakeholders can do to make things better? Why I'm saying this is we are talking about the third wave and the fourth wave coming, and in a safe place like Hong Kong, we had 61 cases, and today we are going to have more. Government is going to have a lot of restrictions very soon. So with all this no end in the sight and the situation the way it is, what do you think for the seafarers we can do to make it easier for them to come back home, and also for the people to go back on the ship? Because if they don't go back on the ship, what do they do? I mean, it's so difficult both ways, right?
Yes, that's right. Um, First and foremost, at the start of this session, I stated that it's not just the shipping world that's involved. Okay, it's actually when all of this started, I realized, the importance of government coming in, understanding the shipping sector, the airline companies, port agents, money agencies, and a lot more. It's like an octopus. Okay, there are a lot of other sectors that has to be engaged with us. One thing that probably uh, first and foremost, the best thing that we can do is to really involve all governments, okay, for a better understanding of what it will take for our seafarers to get home easily, okay, without the involvement of the government, because they're in control. If one country says, okay, we cannot do crew change here, then we're gone. Okay, we're now going to have a difficulty. It would not be easy anymore for the Filipinos or any other nationalities to come home. And we cannot even replace the crew on board. Okay, first, government, that's very important. I even suggested in one of the um, conferences also that we should have a round table discussion involve, involving all other sectors, not just the shipping sector. Okay, because they would understand the need. For example, for airline companies, they will now understand the importance of introducing a different kind of flight to be able to to bring home our crew or deploy them back to the ships. Sometimes you only think of chartered flights or commercial flights, but there can be something in between. Okay, they can organize something that would be able to take, or probably a special flight that would take back the crew on board and also take them back home. Okay, all of this has to be well orchestrated. There has to be collaboration, cooperation. If possible, if IMO can actually do this, okay, in behalf of the shipping industry, then that would be great. We
Right.
should think
Yeah.
in unison, all of us.
No, no, absolutely. And just to let you know that there are a lot of chartered flights, and for chartered flights you have to book some number of seats, take or pay, and that is where a number of ship owners, ship management companies, they collaborate together. And a smaller ship owner in Hong Kong, couple of them I spoke to, they said some of these ship managers are so wonderful, so great. They have spare place and space, and they tell us, okay, and we all combine together. So that is being done. I think it's very appreciable, which is what is being done. we somehow, Karen, cannot compare with the airlines, because airlines, there's hardly any traffic going on. Shipping is still thriving. Shipping has to move on. Otherwise, we have to eat. We have to, like all that what happened. So it's an amazing thing. But one question, one point you brought up very, very nicely, and I'll ask Amitabh ji on that. Uh, Karen talked about the intergovernmental cooperation, sir, and possibility of having standardization on the SOPs. Is it really practical? You think can that be done as a part of IMO Circular 4204 or something like that?
See, the situation in every country is different. Even within the country, the situation is very different in a federal structure like us. It is very different between states. So today, one state would be seeing a spike. They may not have enough infrastructure available to deal with problems coming from outside. Others may have spare capacity and they may, decide to pitch in. So, as Suin said, situation is changing every day. And given the changed circumstances, all the SOPs, even the central government's order, it allows the states to bring their own variation given the circumstances that they face. So having a common SOP, having the best practices in an SOP, which is replicated everywhere, is doable. But to have the same rules for every port, for every country, for every place in a country would be rather difficult. Though in India, we have managed to have one SOP for all the ports. And if India can do it, India has 29 states. If India can do it, it is doable. It can be replicated world over. But then to bring all the countries together, to convince them that they need to adopt an SOP which may be a little different from theirs, uh, is a Herculean task. But we have now best practices to see, to emulate, to share. And if these best practices have worked for 6 months or 7 months, so many crew changes have happened following those SOPs, it can be replicated and it can be adopted, but it will be difficult, very difficult.
Right. So another question, follow-up question on that. We are a ship, rather crew supplying nation, India, and same as Philippines and China. Is it just the crew supplying nation's responsibility to think about the crew changes? What about the countries who take advantage, rather not advantage, who make use of shipping? Should they not be cooperating in the crew changes rather than just saying, as someone said down under, that if you want to do crew change, go to the country where the crew comes from? How does that work?
Uh, See, you don't have to be a ship owner to get your cargo from a ship. Ultimately, if the ship is coming to your country, you provide services to that vessel. You have ship repairs, you have ports, you have many facilities that a ship needs. Same is true of crew change. As I said, crew change is an integral part of shipping. If you are providing all other services relating to ship because the ship is bringing your cargo, then there is no reason why crew change should be considered differently. It's just I said in another conference, and I said it rather strongly, that now it is a matter of political will. Initially, there were issues of infrastructure. There were issues of you know SOPs in place. Now, after 7, 8, 9 months of the pandemic, if a country or a port is not allowing crew change, then it is lack of political will and it is lack of empathy and nothing else.
You said it, sir. And I would ask Suin to add on to that, because I can see her, from the smiles, I can see that there's a lot of turmoil going on her in her mind, and she wants to express. So does Anilji. Okay, Suin.
Thanks, Shamit. I agree wholeheartedly with what Amitabh has said. And I think a point that I've been making over the last few years, actually, and if I may be a little bit controversial here, is IMO needs to start doing its job. I think the COVID-19 situation is just another example of where IMO is behind where the industry is in terms of its setting of best practices and regulations for the industry. I agree that there needs to be political will in order to solve the crew change situation. And in fact, we think about it, right? The sulfur, the bunker fuel situation. There needs to be political will there. The problem I see with IMO is that it is all about politics at the moment, and it needs to be stopped.
But something else also, Suin.
Exactly. And it needs to be more about industry. It needs to be more about what is right for the industry and how we can drive this industry forward. So that's why I was smiling, because political will, IMO, and the shipping industry is something we discuss quite a bit about, usually over drinks on the side. But yeah.
But Suin, another thing is that IMO is quite reactive rather than proactive, and the reason they can't act is because COVID has not happened before. Anyway, Anilji, what do you have to say?
Well, difficult to add a thought after so much has been said on this. But one oblique suggestion made by a friend of mine was that finally, in the end, over political will and everything else, economics plays an important role. And where a human being sees profit, he goes and does what he needs to do. So there are full of cases that we've seen where political will does not exist, where people don't find it difficult to collaborate, and yet economics takes over, and then profit drives a lot of people. So somebody who's completely unrelated to my industry said, he said, Anil, why can't you show that fellow who's going to do all that service for you that he can make so much money out of it? Of course, I laughed it out by saying that he's already making so much money out of me that there's no scope anymore left. Next thing I'll have to hand over my ship to him. But having said that, I think also so nothing to add to what DJ Sab said and what Ms. Anand said, but I think the fact that people are seeing now this as an opportunity to be able to provide services. For example, these charterers. Now you have 2 or 3 master mariners who had nothing to do with this thing are now gone into the business of getting you space on aircrafts. So there's somebody sitting in Singapore who does this full time now. So new opportunities have come up, new businesses are coming up, and people are able to see that if therefore I can improve change crew of seafarers, this is the kind of economic benefit I would get. Why go outside? I mean, within India also, there were a lot of changes that were taking place in Cochin. And then somebody decided that off Wingham, you have a deeper draft and you can do an exchange of crew offshore, and that has started. And then the government of Kerala immediately, Tamil Nadu realized this needs to be done. They jumped into all of this, granting permission. Kerala jumped in, and suddenly you have business going there. And DG Sahab knows that we started. So I think commerce drives a lot of people. Of course, it's not to. It comes lower down the scale. Absolutely, political will is important. Political games are played today. We are seeing news items where vessels are stuck, people are stuck because of politics. So yes, that's absolutely clear. But somewhere down the road, if commerce also can be given its due share, I think some change can happen somewhere.
Yeah, no, I do agree with all the points. That political will, absolutely important. Commerce, absolutely important. Now, the people who are on the ship, and in future also we are going to need the people on the ship. So the last question, possibly before I request you to wrap it up. The future of our industry is contingent, the sort of new regulations coming in, and the world is going to change. The shipping is going to change. So we need to attract talent at sea also assured in order to progress and face those challenges which are coming. You think with all this is happening and what seafarers are thinking and what the people who are observing them, what they are going through, is it going to drive away the good people, the brightest and the best from coming to sea? Or we are going to shift the nationalities and the place of crewing to somewhere in Africa or wherever else? It's a difficult one. I'm sorry. I've been very open and frank. Yeah.
Okay. As I can see it, my generation and the one slightly ahead of me, um, in India, and for those of you who are not part of India, Jagmeet ji, you will know, but otherwise, uh, going for NDA, going for the civil services exams, you got the cream of our society going there. And the generation just ahead of me were full of master mariners and chief engineers who either were in NDA or who would say, I cleared my civil services exam and I then decided I'll go and become a mariner, etc. So that is the kind of intelligence and the kind of people slightly ahead of me. My generation, I would say 10 years ahead of me. My generation, slightly lesser. To answer your question point blank, on the basis of the data available today, because of greater opportunities available, because of the fact that the world has opened up, newer opportunities have come up, we are definitely finding that perhaps the best are not coming into our market. And this is not true just for seafarers. I can tell you this is true for the ship owning community on shore also. Today, a chartered accountant young boy will think whether he wants to come in and work for a ship owning company, or rather he would probably go and work for an IT company, or they see this as a sunrise. So I think what is important for us is to be able to demonstrate that we are a sunrise industry. And in order to be able to do that, we need to do what is exceedingly important is to look beyond our markets. In the earlier days, we used to look at the coastal belt, etc. The office of the DG shipping for the past, I would say, at least about 10 years from now, has been pushing us to go inward. So now you are getting a lot of more seafarers. Like I mentioned to you the other day, Chandigarh, has a Master Mariners Association. I mean, who would ever think 15, 20 years ago, Chandigarh, a landlocked state or a landlocked area would have, you had usually all your mariners coming from Konkan region, from Tamil Nadu, etc. So I think we will not fall short of people. I think, those people will have that attraction. They will come in. The only thing, and I'm sure you will agree with this, and our DJs have also may agree, that unlike a doctor's son becoming a doctor, in the space of maritime, I'm finding that a mariner's son is not becoming a mariner. Very few of them, and I'm happy to be proved wrong, but I don't know why one needs to look at that, but that is not happening.
That's under the normal circumstances, isn't it? Even then we had this, to keep out shifting the gravity of where to get the seafarers from. But
Right.
in today's environment, when I'm from Chandigarh, when all those kids around there, uncle is not coming home. He's been on ship for 13 months, 14 months. Auntie is suffering. Is this a life? I'm talking about with this, what is happening today. Is it going to further drive away? Suin, what do you think? And then I'll come to Amitabh ji.
I think it's a discussion across all segments of the maritime value chain at the moment. I think if we start off focusing on seafarers, I mean, my uncle was was part of the Indian Merchant Navy. He had 2 daughters. None of them are involved in the maritime industry. If he had a son, I would tend to agree with Anil ji and say, he probably would have told his son, go become a maritime lawyer, but not go down the seafarer route, right? So I think when it comes to seafarers, from my very basic understanding, a lot of them come from developing nations because it was a way for them to make money to support their family. And then as they educate the next generation, as the next generation gets exposed to more opportunities other than seafaring, onshore jobs, tech jobs, sexier jobs, so to say, that can keep them closer to family. You know, the trade-offs would mean that most of them tend to take those jobs. So I think when it comes to seafarers, I think given the population of India, the population of China, we probably will still see a lot of crew coming from China and India because of the inward move. Population and economics has a lot to play in that. Philippines, unfortunately, Karen's not here. Would be interesting to hear her thoughts on that. But possibly, you know, in the short term to mid-term, we'll probably still see crew coming from Philippines. But I do think that as we look further out, we will probably see more crew joining from the current developing nations. The only nuance there, or I would highlight, is as we get into the realm of autonomous ships, and as the caliber of people you probably want to put on board ships changes, would we then see people who are more qualified, or would we actually require, by virtue of safety requirements, people who are more qualified to be on board ships to work with autonomous vessels to ensure the safety of sea shores?
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
And that's those side jobs. We just need to rebrand shipping to make it as sexy
I
as
know,
it is.
I understand, but my main question that I was insisting or saying this is, when today's seafarers or their colleagues look at, or at least when they feel when they are on board the ship, they cannot go home and the families are suffering, uh, or the feeling that they get that they are not being taken care of and they are not the key workers labeled, and because of that, they are not getting that support. Does that have any effect of on us not getting the quality people in future? That's Amitji, what do you think? Amitabhji, Hanji.
See, the current situation is it's not permanent. It is an exception, and not only seafarers are suffering in terms of job. You know that many people have lost their job because of pandemic, and ultimately, when the economy goes back to its normal track, uh, the things will settle down a little bit. But what you have discussed is a long-term shift that has happened in seafaring as a profession. And that shift, again, as Anil said, has not only been in shipping. It has been in almost every sector. The reason being that in last 20 years, the service sector that has grown so much has caught the attention of the middle class, upper middle class. Earlier, merchant shipping used to be a glamorous profession because there were very few professions where a middle class person would get to travel, would earn a lot of money, and live a good life. Today, there are so many professions where you earn more than what a merchant navy officer earns without going to sea. And obviously, the urban population that used to come to merchant navy earlier is going elsewhere. It is going elsewhere, whether it is public sector, whether it is, you see that trend, mechanical engineering is no more a choice preference even for Indian middle class. It is computer science and electronics, management and law. These are more preferred subjects. So that it shows the shift that has happened from manufacturing to service industry. Uh, a very important and very interesting point that Suin mentioned. Of course, we all discussed as to why seafaring profession shifted from urban Indian city to Group B, and from Group B, it will finally shift to Group C cities, Grade C cities, and that is where people will have more hunger to work in merchant navy, and maybe the quality of education will improve in those cities in days to come. What will be interesting to see is the shift that happens once autonomous vessels come. autonomous vessel will bring new challenges for the students also, and these may be much more interesting for today's students than pure marine engineer or nautical science has today. Uh, we are planning to introduce a few new subjects in India. We are now trying to link computer science with nautical science, computer science with marine engineering, and computer science with naval architecture. We also want to link electronics with nautical sciences and electronics with marine engineering to prepare a group of people who can work in autonomous environment, to see if these people can work at both places, on board and on shore, and look into the entire gamut of requirements of autonomous vessels. If these subjects become popular, I am sure a very different kind of crowd will come for merchant navy sector in days to come. I'm not talking of tomorrow, but maybe 5 years from now or 10 years from now, we will see a very different type of people coming to merchant navy, and that is purely related to the growth of shipping industry, the direction in which it is going.
Absolutely, sir. I think I'm so happy that you said the changes which are happening and what you're doing. That's the way forward. 2 points from everyone. From the seafarer's perspective, this crew change perspective, what do you think those two things which can be done to improve upon the situation? Starting with ladies first, Suin.
I think the two things, the first thing is I would start at the governmental level. I do think that governments really need to start thinking about what permanent regulations they can put in place to allow crew change to happen, in whether it's in a pandemic situation or in an unforeseen circumstance. I think certainty in that regard is absolutely necessary. I think, secondly, whilst we are still living in a time of uncertainty, and whilst we still don't have a foolproof solution to the crew change problem, I think all players in the value chain and in the supply chain need to do their best to treat and do what's right to treat crew as normal human beings, as decent human beings, and to make them feel valued, and to try their best to get them home when they've been working on board um, beyond their contract period. And encompassed in that is also making sure the media accurately represents the problem instead of painting crew as being a problem or a cause of spread of COVID-19 within a certain city or country, as we have seen previously in various media reports. So I think industry needs to do more to paint the accurate picture of the issues which we are facing right now.
Thank you. Gentlemen.
Uh, so I think I'll speak before the DG because I'm sure he would have a wiser word. I have only one prescription, and that is what I started off talking about: education and awareness. I think that is a must. Whether it's the press, whether it's people on shore, anybody, governments, political will, I think education and awareness would sort most of the issues that bog us today. So that's only single prescription from my end: education and awareness. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Amitabh ji.
Uh, we to change should not be a problem. Uh, we need empathy. We need collaboration within the industry, collaboration within the country, and collaboration with the outside world. And we need to induct technology because many things that we have been doing manually in the past cannot be done in the present situation. We need to adopt technology, and if we do all three, there should be no issue relating to crew change in times to come.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And I think with this, I'm very, very grateful to all the panelists for such wonderful discussion and the concepts and viewpoints. I fully agree with you. Starting with empathy, of course, that is the most important. Having systems which work together, like on the ship, we have the anchor chain, one fits into the other. If we have those common SOPs and understanding, that does a lot. And of course, what Anilji said after that, I think that is so very important. And with that, Suin, Amitabhji, Anilji, and Karen, she had to leave. Thank you so much. And we really appreciate this to our conference, Maritime SheEO, and we'll see you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
For having us here.
Thank you.